Let's talk all about AI in business. It's hosted by Brent Muller. Welcome to the Future Proof Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to Future Proof, the podcast where we're decoding how founders, leaders, execs are using AI systems and automation to work smarter and drive company growth faster. If you're looking to future-proof your business, you're definitely in the right place. And before we get started, we always offer this out to everybody. If you're looking to figure out how to, where to start with AI, we do free 30-minute, no pitch collaboration calls. The links will be in the show notes. We're happy to just jump on a call with you. And if we can't help you, we will point you to some of our great podcast guests who are happy to help and jump in. So let's get to today's episode. I am joined today by the CEO and founder of Courtsquared Group, Keith Parent. Keith, thank you for joining and spending some time with us.
Brent, it's great to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah. So let's jump right in. Let's talk about your background first and leading up to starting the company.
Sounds good. So I'm an IT guy by trade. Master's in computer science, and I started my company over 30 years ago. So we're on our 31st year right now.
Congrats on that, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a long time. I didn't know that I'd be there doing it this long. So I started my company. My first customer was Pfizer Pharmaceuticals 30 plus years ago.
Not a bad first customer to have, by the way.
Not a bad one. And so what we do is we're a managed service provider. We manage infrastructure, IT infrastructure for life science companies. And when I consider life science companies, it's pharmaceutical, biotech, med device. I know a lot of firms out there will talk about healthcare in general, but healthcare is really a different beast. The pharmaceutical world and the life science world is really governed by the FDA, and we're really worried about patient safety from a perspective of creating the new drugs and doing the clinical trials and all the stuff that's out there. So if you think about any IT from that perspective, we can host and manage applications all the way from preclinical through manufacturing for the life science companies. We've also developed a system called RegDocs 365, which is a content repository hosting any kind of clinical or regulatory content. And I think it's important to note there's lots of great managed service providers out there that know IT backwards and forwards. But the issue is we're in a very niche area of life science where most of the heavy hitters in this area are the large IT departments within the big pharmaceutical companies because they focus in on how they're going to protect themselves and what they're going to do and how they're doing that. So from our perspective, we want to be able to bring that same rigor at a very large company like a Pfizer or a Lilly or Novartis, and we want to bring that down to smaller companies that are out there that may hire some young kids out of college that just don't know what they're doing or have to have quality on top of those kind of things. Our goal is to keep working with those companies. I've incorporated AI into a lot of what we do, specifically because our content repository and all of the systems that we run have a lot of data locked into either structured or non-structured data. And that non-structured data is a perfect opportunity for an AI system to be able to come in and be able to look at that and use that information. Case in point is a system we developed. I've got a number of clients who will go out and they'll buy new compounds. And a compound is something that's the underpinnings for a new drug that's going to be out there. Right. They'll buy a compound from a big pharma company that if it's not going to be a $1 billion drug, it's not worth it to them. So they'll sell those off. Well, these small companies, these startup companies will buy that compound. And what they're really buying is a lot of documents. They're buying all sorts of documents from early clinical trials, all of their testing for pharmacovigilance, all those kind of things that they do. But it's all locked in documents, right? So we migrate those documents and we do things. We created a cross-referencing tool that will not only identify all the documents that they've bought, but it'll actually read through every single document and it will identify documents that are referred to in those documents. So during the due diligence phase, you can actually grab the documents that you already know about and make sure that you've got them. But what's even better is that you're going to find out the documents you don't have. And then you can say, okay, where are these documents? Because what happens is usually 6 months or 9 months down the road, they're going through all these documents. They may get 10,000, 20,000 documents when they buy a compound. And all of a sudden they're looking for some tests that are referred to, but they don't have them. So now they've got to go back to that company and find them. And usually that team has been disbanded. They're gone. They're out of the way. So those are kind of things where I look at point solutions to solve specific problems.
And you know how much time saving that is? Like you think about that the amount of man hours during due diligence before AI that you'd have to do with 10,000 documents and searching through. And I just can't even imagine the time saving, just that one use case that you're just highlighting.
Well, it's funny because I talked to somebody from a large pharma company. I won't name the company, but they said, whenever they do something like that, they actually ship it over to a team in India that's got like 300 people. He said, and they'll go through all those documents, and their hit rate is only about 30%. So basically, they'll go through those documents and they'll find maybe 30% of the missing documents. Well, that's a success to them. The reality is, by going through these documents, you can actually get close to 90 to 100% of all the documents that you're referring to, because it'll find things which you're not even thinking about. So most people will look at the table of contents or the glossary and find out where things are at. This looks through every piece of content. And to think about it, you have to take a reference in a document and you have to then equate that to a file that's named something different. So you've got to try to figure that inference and how they work together. It's really an interesting way to do it. And that's a perfect opportunity from an AI perspective to be able to do that kind of stuff. When I look at AI, we were talking a little bit earlier, and one of the things that I was mentioning was that I work with a number of different AI companies, and I've done it on purpose because what happens is I want to find out if they really know what they're doing. There's a lot of hype around AI. There's lots of proofs of concept out there. There's
way too much hype, right, Keith? Yeah,
way too much. So what I find out is there's some very smart people in these AI companies, but the reality is they go off, you tell them something, and they go off on their own, and they develop a solution that has nothing to do with reality when you come back to you. So I found that you have to really tie the AI companies with some subject matter expertise so that they can actually understand what the people in the industry are using or what they need to do, and they can work with the AI companies to actually develop a solution that's practical and can replace that. Now, in our industry, because we're highly regulated, one of the big problems that we have is that we have lots of documents around and lots of things, whether they're training records or they're testing or they're clinical trial records, things like that. But we have to gather all that data. And because they want all that data, it comes in a lot of different formats. When you think about the whole drug supply chain and clinical trials and things like that, one of the problems that we have is that in the clinical trials, we get documents that come in from clinical sites. Well, at a clinical site, you may have a secretary that's taking a whole bunch of documents, or some kind of data person that's taking a whole bunch of documents, and they'll take these things and they'll scan them in and they'll email them into somebody. Well, now it comes in as one big PDF. Somebody's got to break that apart. Somebody's got to read that. Somebody's got to then classify where it goes. We created a tool called a TMF auto classification tool. A TMF is a trial master file. We created a tool that will actually read through those documents and identify what they should be and where they should be classified within the trial master file. And if it's got a high enough confidence level, it immediately puts them away. But if it doesn't, it will put them on a human in the loop category, and a person will be able to look at that. Even that saves them a tremendous amount of time, because just not having to open a document and read through it, we give them what we think it's going to be, and we tell them how confident we are and where that is. And if they're confident, they say, yay, put it away. If not, they tell us what it is, and that goes into the machine learning algorithms to figure out that next time it goes through it, it'll know where it goes. So those are the kind of things I look at, the ground floor. What are people doing today that is manual in nature? How can we help them to get past all of that and get them, helping them to do things at a much higher level from an AI perspective? And I think that working with the right AI company, you can come up with those solutions and you can stay ahead of the game, and you can really kind of work on those kind of things.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Keith. And I love the approach that you're taking. So as you look at the pharma industry in general, right, and kind of like your view on the ground, right? I think that is exactly, as we were talking earlier, exactly how you drive these kind of use cases. You've already given a few. What are you seeing from it, like in the industry in general, the adoption? Are people taking the right approach in your view? Or
here's a couple of things that I'm seeing. So when you talk about the really big pharma, the only ones that can really afford to spend big money on these are the big pharma companies. They'll put a whole department together that's now an AI department going for future projects and things like that. They're going to ask out the whole company, and they're going to say, hey, give us your 200 or 300 biggest problems, and let's look at if we can use AI to solve that problem. So when they get all those things, those issues that come in, they pick the top 5. So now that top 5 will get the focus area. And what happens is they may spend a ton of money on that to find out that they just saved a meager amount. So they probably spent 10 times more than what they needed to do it. They need to find something that's going to give them the biggest return on investment. Now, the other side of that is what happens to those other 295 projects that didn't get taken care of. Those are the ones that are down on the ground where there's meaning to those, and they need to kind of add something to those. So to me, I work backwards. I work from where do I see the most manual effort? How can I solve that problem working with the larger companies and then bring that solution down to the other ones? I work with both big pharma companies and I work with small ones. I work with startups. The startups are the ones that need it the most. When you think about who's most resource constrained or who doesn't have the tribal knowledge, it's going to be these small companies. Well, you take that knowledge, the machine learning aspect of it, working with these big companies, and then you build your models that you can bring down to the smaller ones. So that's a tack that we've taken, and we work with these small companies to figure out what are that they need the most, and how can we put those things together for them, working with the other companies. And sometimes it's tangential to one type of project that we can then morph into another project for a smaller company. But I really see that AI can help the most. One of the things people worry about is losing their job. Everybody says, "Oh, AI is going to take my job." The reality is, we already have a scarcity of knowledge for some of these things,
And
particularly
talent. Yeah.
of talent. So particularly in the clinical and regulatory area, one of the nice things is we can take these people that are my age, that are starting to retire, and they're leaving the industry. We
Right.
need to capture that knowledge, and we need to help that for the younger people coming up that are going through these programs, but maybe not have the experience of having done it hundreds of times. So how do we take that? Using AI, we can actually build models that can help them to do a better job, and they can do their job faster, and they can learn from some of the things that we're putting together and using from that. So I look at AI totally different than a lot of people do, and I don't ever see it's going to solve every problem. I see it solving very specific problems, and coming up with those point solutions that may get the biggest bang for the buck for them. And that's what I'm
Yeah.
going at.
Well, and you're hitting on a really good point. Is I always emphasize the fact, and I think we were talking earlier about the there's use cases for survive and there's use cases for thrive. And we're not going to get into that today, but what we're talking about now is taking out the grunt work, drudgery, and inefficiencies of processes, which does a couple things in my estimation. Is one, it makes the employee that much more efficient and better at their job, right? So that's why we always call them digital. AI's digital coworker, right? That's where
Yep.
Copilot came from, right? The second thing is it increases morale because they feel like they're being way more productive, right?
Yes.
They're making a bigger impact, and they're going to come up with things that we can do that no one's thinking about. Like AI is like a brand new, right, landscape, and no one's got it figured out. I don't care if you're an AI expert, already. No one's figured this out because to your point, if you have a SME that can figure out and document a process, the AI might not just take the drudgery out of it, but it may help redefine a better workflow for that. And that all that does is now it frees up that employee to be able to think more, to do what you really wanted them to do in the first place. But
That's
as
right.
you were talking about, how many times do we get bogged down in a particular job where you're like, oh my God, I got to go dig through 100 documents to find the answer I'm looking for. Imagine, you implement an AI like you're talking about with the regular docs. I talked to someone in government the other day, and like, you can't imagine how much more efficient we are at being able to like respond to RFPs and filling out the government documents. And I said, I can't even imagine what it was like before. He's like, you
That's right.
really can't. And he said, if we can get AI to do that, you're going to find happier people, happier employees, and things are going to get done faster, which is all a great benefit. So I love your approach on specific use cases and starting to talk about that. So I think, Keith, you just need to keep highlighting that and working with these different teams because there's not enough people on the ground doing this.
100%. I agree. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. So as you look down the road, right, the next 1 to 2 years, where are the best opportunities for your company, for Courtsquared, but also for helping your clients, right, in new and innovative ways?
Well, I think what we work at, when I look at new and innovative ways of doing things, I think a little bit differently. Like I said, I go after these common sense areas that we look at for some of these things. I do believe that there's going to be things now that we rely on people to do day in and day out just because we've been doing that forever. I
Yeah.
think there are going to be some of those kind of things that we're going to replace some of the capabilities of what those people were doing. Medical writers is a big thing. You have all these medical writers that come in and they take all this scientific data and they put something together. Or you mentioned responding to RFPs. Salespeople get these big RFPs coming in from the government or coming in from big pharma, and being able to
They're
put
a nightmare too.
the response. They're a horrible nightmare to put together. So generative AI is great for being able to do some of that stuff. If I'm going to be doing a drug submission to a country, to anywhere in the EU, a lot of times you do it for one country, but you've got to do it. You've got 20 or 30 countries you got to deal with. Why do I have to do it every single time? Why can't AI take that first one I'm doing and replicate it for the other ones? Maybe there's some
Absolutely.
different rules. Maybe there's some different ways of doing things. But why can't I do that? Those are things we should be looking at taking out of the hands of people, or giving people tools that make their job that much easier so they can do it much faster.
Yeah.
When I look at drug development and I look at the pipeline, most people look at the cost leading up to going to the market to getting final approval. Well, if you can take any of that cost out by dropping that timeline down, we can get drugs. Not only will the companies make more money because they're going to have more time with exclusivity on that drug, but it's also going to get back to the patients faster. And that's really what we want.
Right.
We
That's
want
outcome based, right?
That's
Yes.
exactly right. We want those kind of things happening. I know that everybody's thinking about, oh well, I'm going to use AI to develop new drugs or come up with new things, and that's all well and good. And I think there's some
Right.
great companies working on some of that. But I think all of that manual stuff that we do that slows us down because it's just rigor that they have to figure out. If we can cut all of that down and really knock that timeline down from when they start to when they actually submit things to the regulatory authority, that's going to get drugs out to the consumers much faster.
Absolutely. I think that you're going to find that there's two different paths, right? What you just talked about, right? It's a great example, right? There are a certain faction of people thinking about how do I use AI to create and ideate on new drugs, right? And that's what we call the top line stuff. But what people are ignoring is what you just talked about is that if you can drive the inefficiencies out on the bottom line stuff, everything moves faster in that company. And to me, I think that subtle piece that you just mentioned is what is being lost. People are, a lot of leaders are not thinking of it that way. But if you really think about how you can drive those efficiencies out and get things done and through the pipeline faster, no matter what your business is, but in this case, getting drugs to market faster, that means it gets in the patient's hand faster. And I think everybody wins. But also, it helps on the margins, right? So it's a
Right.
win-win-win all the way around. And that's what I want to highlight as we have these kind of conversations is I want people to start to open their minds to thinking that there's two sides to this coin and they both work. They're just probably two different groups of people doing it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
100%.
So you were talking to me earlier about just, kind of a simple use case where the team was, they had an offshore team, right? That was just a 30% hit rate. Just kind of real quick, go through that because I think that's a great example of not only accuracy improvement, but speed and inefficiency we're talking.
Well, I mentioned that I had been in this industry for 30 years. So if you think about the transition I've seen over those 30 years, one of the big things was we did everything in the US at one point. Then all of a sudden we started offshoring everything. And it was just basically taking all these teams in, whether it's Pakistan and India or Philippines or wherever it was, South America, it didn't matter. We were just offshoring all this work. And why did they do that? Because they could get
Cheap
lots
labor.
of people to do it cheap labor, right?
Yes.
Well, what we're talking about now is AI can actually replace that cheap labor and actually do a better job at it because now
Absolutely.
a computer can look at every single thing. If you look at that one example of the cross-referencing of a document, if you only have a 30% hit rate reading through a document, finding the external references, but I can now jump that 30% up to 95%,
Right.
how much extra work does that save me for a 100,000 document bolus of documents?
Right.
Because what happens is you're going to go down the road and you're never going to be able to get all those documents in with that 30% rate. You're always going to be doing extra work, rework, and things like that. If the higher I can make that, the quicker it comes in. Also, you may find documents that you weren't thinking about as part of due diligence that maybe have you renegotiate or do something else, right?
Yeah.
So that's the other side of the coin. You may find things that you weren't finding before because of that. But I do believe that manual effort, that just offshoring that stuff, even those guys, give them the tools to do their job better and let them do some of that stuff,
Right.
and maybe it could be even cheaper.
Right. And you may not need 100 people. You might need 10 people offshore to do that job. Or maybe you need all of them, but they could do 300% more work than they're used to at an accuracy rate that is triple.
Or
right?
maybe they can be the human in the loop that's doing the validation stuff that then gets pushed off to the expert here. So now they're only looking at the really tough things that look out of whack.
Yes.
And every system has some of those kind of things where you've got to really teach the machine learning how to work with stuff.
Yeah. Honestly, I think as you start to get more and more into this, Keith, with your team and start to document some of these use cases, right? This is where I've seen, and I've had other podcast members that have service and consulting companies that they have started to build these solutions, just like your Reg 360 that you have, right? That start to build solutions and be able to, sell them to these companies, their clients, because like you said, there's 295 things that company might never get to. You might find a couple that, hey, I can build a product and be able to sell it to them because it just helps your client, right? These are the kind of ideations that I think are going to come out and be, like I was saying before, it's a win-win-win all the way around.
Well, it's funny because a lot of times people ask me, who do I sell to? A lot of times I don't sell to the IT departments in big companies. I sell to the business units because they're the ones with the problems. And the problems is sometimes they'll go to their own IT department and it's a year out before they can even talk to them. They have that many projects. The reality is we can have something up and running in a matter of weeks, and they can actually start to see the benefit of that where it materially affects their work. So that's where, coming in and working directly with the business, because they know what their problems are.
So I love that, by the way. So tell me a little bit about how you see the industry taking shape, right? What changes are you seeing or do you anticipate?
Well, what's interesting is you see lots of big dollars going into these big companies out there from an AI perspective. And I think that's great that somebody's putting that much money in. The issue is, I think that there's going to be a way that we've got to figure out how it gets more democratized across everybody. And how do we understand where it works? I'm working with a couple small companies now because we've got our own internal models. We've got small language models. We're doing stuff inside of our own firewall because we need to from a regulatory perspective.
Right.
So from me looking at that, I'm hoping that those guys are solving some of these major problems so that can be used for other people, that we can bring it inside the firewall and use it on our own for some of the other problems that we have out there. It's incredible to see how fast some of this stuff is happening. And one of the things that I talk to a lot of people, I'm on a number of AI committees within the life science world. And I always tell people, look at other industries, look at what they're doing out there. Yeah. Just because we're highly regulated doesn't mean we can't bring some of that same technique into here and
Absolutely.
use that. So I think that to me is looking outside of your own niche area, or take the blinders off and look around, see what else people are doing. We do so much in retail right now that people don't even think about. I mean, just talking in your house and all of a sudden some ads start popping up on your computer or your phone. Well, everybody's listening to everything you're talking about now, right?
Yep.
So things like that, when I think about clinical trials or I think about adverse events, when we're talking to a patient that's on a clinical trial, why aren't we capturing some of that stuff? Real world evidence. And that's what we deal with all the time, is that would be something like a real world evidence. If I look at, I saw an ad for, Facebook Terminal or something years ago, and I said, that would be a great little thing to put into a clinical trial, that if every morning when you took your drugs, you could just say a quick diary submission or something like that through your Amazon Alexa. That's the kind of things where those kind of things tying together would be huge. I think that, one of the things I've been working with is a company that does patient registries, and we gather patient data from patients directly. Right. I would like to cross patient data over research data and actually look at how can I connect up patients that have very weird diseases with researchers that are looking for those patients but haven't found them yet.
Right. Yeah, like almost more of a matchmaking of, exactly. Because this allows those specialty drugs to actually take foothold, because in the past, if they couldn't find enough patients for this, they're like, it's not worth us investing in it, right?
That's right.
If we can start to do that, guess what? You're gonna have better outcomes, because they're going to say, hey, if I know the patient base is there, right, and I can connect with them, then I'm happy to manufacture that drug.
Yeah, and I found a couple companies that are actually pretty good at looking at patient cohort data and identifying maybe a subset of patients that are affected a little bit differently or stand out for reasons. I think those are the kind of companies that all of a sudden you say, well, this drug may not be good for the large set, but it does a really good job on these. Right. Now we're getting into more of the personalized medicine, and we start to talk more about focusing in on some of those patient populations, which to that population means a lot.
Yeah, I totally agree. The last question I have for you is because you're on these committees and you're kind of seeing things firsthand, and you went through, right, the mobile adoption, cloud adoption. What is the difference you see in AI adoption / hype, right, versus the cloud and versus mobile? Because those were big, but they also, you didn't have to jump in the cloud as fast, to me, as AI. What do you see?
I think that it's the ease of use that we can make it for people to use things. I was just on a sales call, or actually a project meeting with a group that we were working with, and my AI partner was actually going through showing how some of the background is working, how we're putting together an AI solution. Mm-hmm. I could tell in the middle of that meeting that they were looking at stuff and like their eyes were glazing over and they're like, oh my God, I can't even think of it. And I had to say, stop, guys. I said, I just want you guys to realize we're showing you how it's working, but what you realize is all you're going to have to do is push a button. You're not going to have to do all this work. We're showing you it so you understand the background behind it, where
Right.
it's pulling things in and how it's doing it. Can you imagine if somebody showed you the underpinnings of ChatGPT?
Right.
I mean,
Right. Your head would explode. Right.
Your head would explode. But you'll gladly throw something out there and see what comes out of it, right? So those are the kind of things I think that where I think it's going to go, and just making it more easier for people to deal with it. The faster that we can give them, and a lot of times you don't even know you're doing it, right? It's just happened. Like
Right.
sometimes the autocorrect and things like it, little things like that actually make a big difference to you. Even taking the meeting notes when you see some of these meeting note takers and things like
Right.
that. That's a huge benefit for some people.
Huge benefit, right? And less things get dropped on the floor. Follow-ups are happening much better because of it. And that, to me, there's all this benefit. I'm a big glass half full. I don't do the fear thing. I think the fear thing can come down 10 years from now when we do have robots and doing all that kind of stuff. That's not where we're at today. Today, to me, it's making people's jobs better. It's taking inefficiencies out of things. And obviously, there's going to be some big innovations coming in the next 2 to 3 years. So to me, it's exciting. And I think you've highlighted some really good use cases, Keith, about how to use it and implement it and really take a common sense approach. So I appreciate that.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah. Well, hey, listen, I appreciate you sharing your insights. Tell everybody how to get in touch with Courtsquared that's in your industry, and we'll put all the links for you and your company in the show notes. Yeah, just tell everybody how to get in touch with you guys.
Sure. So we're Courtsquared Group. We're in Massachusetts. We're www.courtsquaredgroup.com or regdocs365.com. You can get to us, and love to talk to anybody that's even just thinking about this. Even if you're trying to do some AI projects, we'd love to talk to you about it and what we're doing and how we're tying that together.
I love it. Love it. And honestly, you have the right mindset and the right approach. So definitely people should reach out to you, to have that conversation. So thank you again, Keith. And that wraps up this episode of Future Proof. And we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you, Brent. Take care.
Thank you.
If you're ready to embrace change and lead with innovation, be sure to subscribe and never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Future Proof Podcast.